Now, let's see. We've talked about what approaches. Oh my gosh. Oh, here's my list of what we need to cover. Okay. Now, does anybody remember the procedures that we've covered? I think we've covered ILS, and I think we remember VOR. I guess that means we have NDB left. Let me see. Oh, and we probably ought to cover radar. Do any of you know if that's right? Should we continue with NDB approaches, or Bob, do you remember what we've covered?
Actually, it's Rick. My notes show we've covered ILS, VOR, and NDB. But Professor, you were extremely vague and mentioned that you would come back to each approach and discuss them more thoroughly.
Did I say that? I could have sworn we covered that in depth, but, well, maybe that was another class, who knows. So, okay, I guess we will get started on radar if that's where you said we are.
The role of the flight instructor continues to expand, and along with it comes an increased responsibility to students and the general flying public. To meet these responsibilities, professionalism has become a necessary prerequisite for the successful instructor. This CFI renewal program defines some of the qualities of the professional instructor and provides other information of practical value to the beginning as well as the experienced flight instructor. This edition will join Rick Castorina, a student and a flight instructor, as he progresses through a normal day. What you just viewed is the beginning of a typical day for Rick. He is enrolled in an instrument instructor ground school. This ground school is designed to educate the student on the information necessary to become an instrument instructor, as well as to provide additional tools needed to become effective crew members and better instructors. As you have seen, Rick and his classmates are frustrated with the lack of professionalism and organization exhibited by their professor. Throughout this program, you will see many of the environments a flight instructor must face in a typical day and the importance of maintaining a professional attitude in each and every interaction. You will also see tips on improving teaching techniques and receive a review of regulatory requirements and authorizations needed to recommend an applicant for a practical test. Let's rejoin Rick and his classmates at the conclusion of their ground school.
Let's see, now we finished covering approaches. So does anybody have any questions? Okay, good. If you haven't noticed, we're coming towards the end of the semester, and that means final examinations, and I think you all ought to be studying for those. Now, you should plan on studying everything we've covered in class, as well as everything from your reading assignments. My finals are comprehensive and essay. So for the next class, I'd like you to write a 5-page paper on your understanding of IFR approaches, okay? And I think I'll give a quiz. I'm not sure what it's going to cover, but why don't you just review all your notes for the last couple of weeks? Well, that should do it. See you next time.
Dan, we are in trouble if this class is supposed to be teaching us how to become instrument instructors.
Yeah, I know it, Rick. We're not only supposed to be learning the information necessary for our check ride, but I thought we learned more than just enough to take the test. We could have become better instructors, to expand our overall knowledge, things like that.
We aren't getting any of the information we need. All we're getting is a bunch of information dumped on us, and we're expected to know it for the test. So far, everything I've done to prepare for my check ride has been on my own. I haven't learned a thing. What a way to teach.
Actually, it's no way to teach at all. Do you remember our professor when we were getting our initial CFIs? He was constantly emphasizing professionalism and teaching to a higher level.
Sure, that's one of the best professors I ever had. He taught us first to establish goals with our students, then define the objectives to obtain those goals, and he emphasized the importance of assessing and evaluating our students' needs.
Yeah. He also taught us how to perform a comprehensive evaluation instead of this memorize and take the test method.
Remember how he explained the continuous process of measuring, judging, and deciding? And he encouraged us to determine why our students pass or fail so we could learn how to better present a subject.
You know, more often than not, when a student passes something, the instructor simply moves on to the next subject. And then, when the student fails, You just keep teaching it over and over again until the student finally passes.
I hope my students feel that I teach and evaluate in a logical and methodical format. I really try to tailor how I teach a subject to fit their personal learning style.
You and me both. I don't want to be anything like this professor who ignores learning styles and everything else that has to do with effective teaching.
I agree.
The classroom environment that you just viewed exhibits a teaching environment with a lack of planning and minimal effectiveness on the part of the instructor. The professor portrays a very casual attitude towards teaching, with very little planning and preparation. Not only is organization and effective teaching a key factor in exhibiting a high level of professionalism, but there are several other aspects that are equally important. Such aspects include proper attire, a positive attitude, an overall professional appearance, and the ability to communicate effectively. Subtle actions, such as maintaining control of the classroom, always having a lesson plan prepared, and building positive relationships with students, all aid in enhancing the professional instructor. In the case of the instrument instructor ground school, there were numerous elements that were missing that would have made this teaching environment more effective. For example, the instructor should be reminded of the 4 basic steps that make up the teaching process. This process has been found to be essential to effective instruction. These basic steps include preparation, presentation, application, review, and evaluation. Whenever you are preparing for classroom or in-flight instruction, it is necessary to prepare a lesson plan. The lesson plan is simply a statement of the lesson objectives, the specific goals to be attained, the procedures and facilities to be used, and the means of evaluating the desired results. The critical point in the lesson plan is the determination of the objective. Once a lesson plan is developed, the instructor or professor is then responsible for introducing the student or class to the subject to be covered during the lesson. After the information has been presented, the student is prompted to apply the new information. During the application step, a student is guided into the development of insights, recitation, and problem solving. Depending on the specific subject matter, portions of the instructor's demonstration and explanatory activity can be alternated with portions of the student's trial and practice activity, although they are technically separate segments of the lesson. For example, during a lecture, a professor will explain a concept and then open the discussion up to questions from the students for further clarification regarding the concept presented. Before concluding an instruction period, it is important that the instructor summarize what has been covered during the lesson and ensure that the objectives set out have been obtained. Prior to student evaluation, the instructor must also verify that all information that will be asked during an exam has been covered with the student. Let's rejoin Rick as he continues with his day.
Rick, thanks for taking the time to explain to me what we were going to do in our lesson today and what you expect of me. My last instructor was always so frazzled. He never could remember what we had done in the previous lesson, much less prepare me for what we'd do in the current lesson. He was so disorganized.
You know, Karen, one of my classmates and I were just discussing this. I'm really surprised at the number of instructors who don't understand how to teach more effectively.
Well, I've just had a couple of instructors, but it seems a typical flight instructor gives you a brief ground explanation, then demonstrates the procedure, and then if you're lucky, they let you actually fly the procedure. And if you have trouble with the procedure, the instructor again demonstrates it, and then has you try it. Eventually you learn something through trial and error. It's incredibly frustrating, certainly not the most effective method.
You're right, it's not very effective at all. It seems that the best instructors do more than just teach by the numbers. They participate in the learning process by actively guiding their students. They have a very positive attitude towards learning. They encourage their students to learn as much as they can, not just enough to pass the test. They thoroughly explain concepts, procedures, and techniques. They take the time to understand their students so they can determine the best method of instruction. Makes a big difference.
I couldn't agree more.
Okay, I think we better get on with the lesson now. As we discussed, we're going to practice landings today, Karen.
Okay.
Do you remember the last time we did landings? Our goal was to land the airplane within 5 feet of a designated touchdown spot. As I recall, we had about 10 knots of wind that day. Well, it looks like we've got about 10 knots of wind again today, so we're going to be able to compare to that of your last lesson. Do you have any questions?
No, I don't. Let's get going.
Okay.
It is important for the instructor to let students know what will occur as well as why it will occur. Additionally, once the student is in flight, they are concentrating on flying, and typically they are not giving you their full attention. Therefore, when you are discussing a task or explaining part of a lesson, wait until the student is flying straight and level so they can pay more attention to you. In some cases, this may not be possible because the student is overwhelmed with the situation. If this occurs, fly the airplane yourself and then proceed with your explanation. As your students' proficiency increases, allow them to fly in more demanding situations. Throughout all phases of flight training, as a flight instructor, you must always keep in mind that your students view you as a role model, and you have a tremendous influence over their attitude towards aviation. You will notice your students will accept and adopt your attitude and approach to flying. When they are impressed by something you do in the cockpit, they will learn it and eventually use it, regardless of whether or not it's in your lesson plan. If you do something that your student isn't ready for, explain the dangers and applicability of that situation. Make sure they know when and how to use their newly acquired knowledge. Let's return now to see how Rick ends his flight lesson with Karen.
Karen, today's flight was excellent.
Thanks.
I can see you really understand what you're doing, and you make all the necessary corrections while on final. I see definite improvement over the last lesson.
Well, it's all starting to come together. I know what I'm doing right and what I'm doing wrong.
Good. Let's go inside and debrief and talk about what we're going to do next.
Okay.
Okay, Karen, do you have any questions about what we did today or anything that we've discussed?
No, I sure don't. I know what I need to prepare for, so I guess I'll see you next week.
Sounds good. Listen, if you've got any questions between now and then, don't hesitate to give me a call.
I won't. See you later.
Okay.
Hey, Rick, got a minute?
Hi, Rhonda. Sure, sit down. What's up?
Thanks. I have a student who's really struggling with landings. I've tried to demonstrate them, talk him through them, and even explain them over and over. I feel I've tried everything, and well, basically he's frustrated and so am I.
Well, Rhonda, sometimes if a student can't grasp a particular maneuver or concept, it may help if another instructor flies with a student and practices the same maneuver. And if that doesn't work, you may want to question the student to see if there's anything inhibiting his ability to learn.
What type of things are you talking about?
An example can be poor eyesight or lack of reading comprehension skills, or your student may even be having trouble with depth perception.
I never thought about vision problems.
If none of those things work, let me know, and if you'd like, I'll fly with him. Keep me posted. Alex, if you want your students to use more of what they learned, then you're going to have to begin teaching at a higher learning level.
What do you mean by teaching at a higher level?
Avoid asking questions that require only memorized answers. Instead, ask questions that require students to explain what they're doing.
Do you mean to say that when I'm teaching a student how to recover from an unusual attitude, instead of just asking them how they should recover, I could ask them to explain what each instrument is telling them and what response they would take based on the information from all the instruments?
That would be a good approach. That way students are describing in their own words what they must do. This gives more meaning to the concept, knowledge, and skills associated with the maneuver and establishes relevance.
I guess students need to be taught to think, analyze, evaluate, and explore, and not just study and memorize to pass the test.
By teaching them at a higher level of learning and encouraging them to think more critically, they will become safer pilots because they understand the concepts behind the answers.
That makes a lot of sense. I think I'm going to begin using these ideas in my lesson plans.
Alex, I can guarantee you that you'll have more informed students and you'll have a better understanding of what you're teaching as well. You know, we ought to get on with the lesson so we can complete our objectives for the day.
Just as Rick was explaining to Alex, teaching on a higher plane leads to understanding and gives more meaning to learned activities. If you want your students to be able to apply more of what they learn, teaching at a higher learning level is a necessity. These thought processes require a complete understanding of basic concepts and knowledge, and working at these upper levels provides motivation that helps students learn the basics. It can also give meaning to basic facts and skills. Students learn meaningful items more thoroughly and remember them for longer periods of time. Higher level learning will teach students to analyze what they are doing and to correctly use what they have learned. You will find teaching at these levels takes more time and is more challenging than teaching at lower levels because techniques must be learned, practiced, and refined. In flight instruction, there is only one level to aim for, and that's the top. You must use the lower levels as stepping stones, but if you instruct only at the lower levels, your students will never reach the top. Let's join Rick as he begins his instrument instructor check ride with a designated examiner.
Well, Rick, let's take a look at your paperwork before we begin the oral portion of your check ride.
George, I've got everything right here. Would you like to see my 8710-1 form
Yeah, let's
first?
do that. Sure. Good. Looks like you have everything filled out correctly. By the way, Rick, remind your applicants that live in rural locations where there isn't an actual street address to include a map and a description of the physical location of their residence.
I'll be sure to emphasize that. By the way, is there anything else I should pay special attention to when filling out the 8710-1 form for one of my students?
You bet. Actually, one other thing that sometimes causes confusion is the entering of flight time. Many people don't realize that the minimum pilot experience required by the appropriate regulation must be entered. However, it's always recommended that you enter all pilot time. Now, let's see here. Your 8710 is filled out properly, except you still need to sign it. Next, I'd like to see your logbook to verify that you have the endorsements required by Advisory Circular 6165 for this check ride.
George, there are 3 endorsements. One for aeronautical knowledge, one for flight proficiency, and the endorsement to certify completion of the prerequisites necessary for the practical test.
All of your endorsements are correct. The only other documents that I need to see are your driver's license, pilot certificate, and a medical.
I have everything right here.
Good. Well, everything looks in order. You know, Rick, you meet all the requirements to have a gold seal on your CFI certificate.
Really? I didn't know that. Actually, I didn't know what the requirements were.
The requirements are spelled out in AC 6165. And essentially what you need is a commercial pilot certificate with an instrument rating, a ground instructor certificate with an advanced or an instrument rating, and also you need to have trained and recommended at least 10 applicants for the practical test, of which 8 have to pass on the first attempt within the previous 24 months.
That's great, thanks.
Do you have any questions before we start the oral portion of your check ride?
No. Let's get started.
This issue of CFI Renewal has provided you with an overview of instructor professional responsibilities. The flight instructor has been granted a tremendous amount of responsibility to effectively train the future generation of pilots. It is imperative for the instructor to understand and meet these responsibilities while maintaining a high level of professionalism. One of the primary purposes of the CFI is to train the student to meet the standards required by the FAA. When an applicant walks through the door of the examiner's office, the applicant should be fully competent. The designated examiner's responsibility is to ensure the applicant is qualified to perform the duties of the rating or certificate sought. The instructor's endorsement in the applicant's logbook, in effect, is saying to the designated examiner, this person is a competent pilot today. Please confirm my finding and issue the temporary certificate and associated paperwork so this person can begin exercising pilot privileges. When a CFI writes an endorsement for an applicant, the regulations say that the CFI shall certify that he or she has found the applicant prepared to perform each of those operations competently as a recreational, private, or commercial pilot. Notice these endorsements do not even speak to the practical test, but rather to the applicant's ability to perform at the level of the certificate sought. It is with this responsibility the CFI must provide a professional and effective learning environment for every student. Remember, when teaching your students, communication is the key to training. If you and the student completely understand each other, the training program will be much more effective. Obviously, the techniques and suggestions that have been provided in this issue for improving flight instructing capabilities are not all-inclusive. Learning to adjust and mold instructor actions to fit the situation and the student is the type of flexibility that makes great instructors.